My name is Mallory Eastman, and I have a 18-year-old sister who has AHC. She was diagnosed, I think we started suspecting it when she was around 2, and then kind of after testing for different things, mitochondrial disorders and whatnot, they kind of were pretty sure that she had it by the time she was about 8. And then, of course, when the gene was discovered a couple years ago, that confirmed it. So Caroline had her first seizure the day she was born, and it was a bad seizure. It was like 3.5 minutes or something, and so she spent some time in the NICU, and she had the diagnosis of epilepsy. But then ultimately she came home, and we kind of thought she was on phenobarbital, but we kind of thought that we were out of the woods. And when she started missing milestones and whatnot, then they gave us a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. But because she had some of the peculiar symptoms that the kids with AHC have, where the eye flutters and, going into the spells where she would lose control over half her body. Bath times was always a trigger, which I know is really common in these kids. I think we still kind of were looking for something. We weren't really satisfied with the cerebral palsy and epilepsy diagnosis. And so I know I was still pretty young at the time, but I know my parents took her to see specialists in Chicago and I think Columbia and Utah, and at some point somebody mentioned AHC, and it kind of seemed to make sense. But one of the specialists thought she didn't have it, so he thought she might have a mitochondrial disorder. So we weren't really sure. By the time she was about 8, a couple other specialists told us that they thought she did have it. And then when the gene study came out, then we knew for sure that she did. Well, she's been on anti-epileptic drugs since she was born, basically. And that didn't really change when she got the AHC diagnosis. I think it was just kind of a peace of mind more than anything, just that, there's a name to it. There's other people that are going through the same thing, and especially when the gene was discovered, just kind of an explanation for the odd symptoms that we saw was kind of, I guess peace of mind was the most that it offered, not so much change in kind of the course of treatment for her. But exciting, because now that we know what the problem is, we can start looking into kind of more effective treatments for it. Yeah, I remember when she was young, when she was a baby, and I was, I guess, kind of a young teenager. It was hard to explain because we didn't really understand exactly what it was, anyways. And at the time, she had these eye flutters, which I'm sure a lot of these kids have, where her eyes would kind of flutter up and down, and one eye would go off to the side. And so people would note me. You can't help but notice it. And I remember my friends being like, "What's going on there?" And it was, because we didn't really know the answer. I just was like, oh, she has these episodes, and then when she would have the paralysis episodes, and sometimes just scream for days. We called them spells, but people were like, what exactly is a spell? And of course, that's the $1 million question, because we didn't know either. I think it was it's hard to explain to people, but having a name to it really helped in that regard, because then for the most part, I think people just are curious. They'll ask, and now we can say that, this is what the disease is called. You can learn more about it. Look on this website, and it just kind of helps to be able to tell people what it is and kind of educate them about it. The unknown is a little more, I think, draws more attention. In terms of triggers for her, I think as she's gotten older, she's 18 now, so she's more in kind of like the steady phase of the disease, I guess, where she doesn't really have spells as often anymore. It's more kind of like the permanent movement issues. But when she was younger, the spells, the classic ones, bath time, I remember in pools, would always kind of trigger an episode. Also, any kind of excitement. So going to a mall or, Christmas Day or her birthday, you could pretty much predict that it wasn't going to go as you hoped it would. She would get really excited and then go into a spell. and then that was pretty much, then she'd have to lay down. I remember sun was always one. When we would go outside, we live in Florida, and so, going out, whenever she would kind of squint her eyes, we knew like a spell would probably come pretty soon, which was challenging living in Florida, especially because she refused to wear sunglasses. But yeah, those, as she's gotten older, she doesn't have those spells, as we call it, anymore. She still has, obviously, a lot of challenges, but they've changed as she's gotten older. I've heard that from other families too, that there's just different phases of the disease. In the early years, it's more kind of frequent spells, kind of transient symptoms, versus but when they get older, it's less frequent, but maybe more permanent damage from all the spells when they were younger. I don't know if other families have seen that, but I think I've heard that that's not uncommon for these kids. Yeah, so Caroline also has epilepsy, as a lot of the kids do. So she takes Depakine, Keppra, and Klonopin, and her seizures were still pretty uncontrolled. So actually, she started a ketogenic diet in January of this year, and because her seizures were still pretty uncontrolled, even though she was on the max doses of those medications, and it's gone really well. She, as soon as she started it, we kind of noticed just she was more alert. She's had like this hand tremor, her hand shakes all the time and it bothers her, and that completely stopped when we started the diet. So those were kind of gratuitous benefits. We kind of weren't expecting them, but were nice. And just her energy levels, her teachers and her physical therapist and everybody notices that she just was more alert and had a lot more energy, was more talkative. And then since, going on the diet, we've also been able to reduce some of her seizure medications, which she was on quite a bit. So we've kind of, I'd say you do it usually one at a time. So we're off of one, down to half of another. And so that increased her energy even more. Now, she's driving my parents crazy in a good way, just that she, doesn't want to take naps anymore. She wants to stay up late. Before that was, she would get tired doing anything. And now she just has lots of energy. All her teachers are commenting on it. She's talking up a storm. So it's been a really good thing for her. Sometimes we forget that she's a teenager, and so some days she is moody and doesn't want to get out of bed. But for the most part, she, a typical day would be, she goes to school 3 days a week. She goes to it's a charter school for kids with special needs, and she has an aide that goes with her. And the aide has been a caretaker for her, since she was like 7 years old. So, and they worked it out so that she could go to school with her. And so that is really awesome because she's great at, involving her and kind of finding social things that she can do with the other kids and whatnot. So she goes to school and she just loves it. She sang in her school's talent show. Her It's the Climb, which I think is Miley Cyrus, her favorite singer and just life person, which was pretty amazing. When her caretaker told us she was singing in the talent show, we were like, this sounds like we're setting her up for disaster. But she actually did a great job. I mean, we could understand her. She could tell she knew the words, and she had a big smile on her face, and she did great. She didn't have a spell, no. Her spells are more few and far between now. She doesn't have them very often anymore. Caroline has, she has I know there's different variants of the genetic mutation, the ATP1A3, and she has one that I've seen some research that it's the more severe one. So she I guess she would fall in that category. She is wheelchair bound. She's tube fed because she aspirates when she eats by mouth, and we've had a couple scary bouts of pneumonia. So physically, I would say she is on the severe end of the spectrum. In terms of communication, she has some challenges like with expressive communication, in the sense that it's kind of hard for most people to understand her, and normally it's like a one word or two word and short sentences, but we can understand her. So in that sense, it's good. She can get her point across. Expressive language wise, I think she's really good. I mean, she'll laugh at like appropriate times of a movie that is way over her. We think it's like an adult movie she's not paying attention to, and then you'll hear her laugh and be like, oh, she understands more than we realize. So I think her receptive language is really good. And yeah, I think physically she is pretty on the severe end of the spectrum. She definitely has learning disabilities, cognitive issues, but she is very bright, like you hear about a lot of these kids. And, the communication challenges make it hard to kind of know exactly what level they're on, but she reminds us a lot that she is very bright and understands pretty much everything. No, I can't remember any that she did particularly bad with. I mean, she was on phenobarbital as an infant, which a lot of these kids were, and I know that's a lot of people have said that can cause further developmental delays, but at the time they just want the seizures to stop when they're an infant, and so we were happy to get her off of that as she got a little older, but I don't remember her having like a severe reaction or anything like that, other than just being completely out of it, sedated. My family went to the AHC meeting in Chicago. I didn't go to that one. I was in school. And then the last one we went to was in Raleigh. And we did bring Caroline to that one, and that was the last time she flew, and probably will be the last time she flies. She had a seizure on the way there, and then on the trip, when we got there, her feeding tube got clogged, and so my parents spent the day in the ER with her getting a new feeding tube. But while I was taking notes in the sessions, so but it was amazing. I mean, being there and seeing her kind of interact with the kids, I could tell in her eyes she just had this wow, these kids are like me. Which must have been really cool for her, because I don't think she's ever experienced that before. So I do wish we could bring her to every meeting, but unfortunately it's not possible unless it's closer to home. But I live in Washington, D.C., so it was nice. This one was local for me, so I just took the day off of work to come and take notes and send it home. I think, and I think that's that one thing is really a benefit to people that are diagnosed now versus being diagnosed, 10 or 20 years ago, is that the internet really makes the world a lot smaller. So, we had heard of AHC when Caroline was younger, and we had a lot of problems with it, but there was nobody we could ask questions like, what did you do? Because even the families with special needs in our, where we live couldn't answer the questions that we had about it, because it was so specific. But now that there's the internet, and there's Facebook groups and these Yahoo or Google groups, it really makes the world a lot smaller. It's really rare disease, but you go there and there's 20, 30, I don't know how many parents that have the same thing, and so they can offer kind of their experiences, like, oh, we ran into that problem too, and here's what we did. This worked, this didn't. So I think it's really a blessing for having a rare disease, having the internet and social media, because you can really kind of, it doesn't feel quite so rare. Maybe just, I think that having a sibling with special needs, obviously it's challenging as you're growing up. And in my case, I was, I'm quite a bit older than her, so I think I had the benefit of kind of understanding it. I think it would be really hard to understand if you were, 3, 4, 5 years old. But, it is challenging, but ultimately I think it makes your life better. It puts everything in perspective. You really learn not to sweat the small stuff, and, appreciate what you have, and just be happy in the moment. Because I know Caroline and a lot of these kids, I've heard the same thing from their parents, is that a lot of things kind of aren't in their favor and are going wrong and are challenges for them, but every day is the best day ever. They're happy as can be, and I think that's a great motto to live by.